4, no, Book 5, The Third Era, The First Year. Chapter 24, The Summer of Anticipation. Memorial Day weekend came, and Milo downloaded these new songs, Lord of the Dance, and I Vow to Thee My Country. Over Memorial Day weekend, the Biancotellos went to church on Saturday night and sat with Uncle Mike and Grandpa Tony. Pavani, Minyu, and Nusha also came to church that night and sat in the same row that the Biancotellos had set up. Pavani was next to Grandpa Tony in church. After church, there was an ice cream social, and then Ray took Milo and Lydia to see 50 First Dates with Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. On Sunday, Uncle Leo and Aunt Jane hosted Sylvester's 6th birthday. That afternoon, Milo, Matt, and Salvatore took their annual walk over the playground. That night, when Matt and Eustace were over, Milo got a bit defensive with Lydia over saying some not so flattering things about Minyu. Mind you, Milo was still not quite over Minyu, and seeing her as a Palm Sunday as a server and Anahita that dream one night all drove these memories quite close to home. The finale of that year was a trip to Indianapolis for Kyle's graduation ceremony. The Biancotellos left that afternoon as soon as Lydia was out of school and drove down with Grandma Pearl to Indianapolis. Over that weekend, the Biancotellos and the Rumcorns and Grandma Pearl saw Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which had just been released in theaters the night before. At midnight, they were going to go to the midnight showing, but were just too tired by the time they got there. Milo had been waiting a good while for this movie to come out. In fact, he found the movie to be a very transcendent experience. Margaret and Lydia did not like the movie as much as the first two, and saw the theme as being a bit dark. Plus, Lydia was not a fan of Michael Gambon as Dumbledore. Lydia missed Richard Harris, who was the original Dumbledore, who had just passed away not too long ago. For Milo, the new Dumbledore reminded him of Monsignor Warner. The next morning, after the graduation ceremony, which was quite long, the Biancotellos went to church in Indianapolis, which was Trinity Sunday. The offertory hymn was this new hymn by Rory Cooney, known as All Things New. Then in the afternoon, they went to Panera's for lunch. After lunch, the Biancotellos returned back to Centerpond. On the way back, they ate at a restaurant they had not been at for the last 3 years, since after coming back from Drake's Forest. When they got in the restaurant, Milo asked if they were the only people there, and we shushed him for that one. Yuriyama's vision of Ravage. The seers Yuriyama and Daniel summon Melendil, Alexander, Kashmir, and Akarism in the spirit of the diplomat Cecil Spring Rice. Yuriyama had recently seen a vision of a Hypercordo taking his throne in the major financial hubs and sending off his offspring henchmen to weaken other metropolises and ravaging the micropolises. One micropolis becomes invaded by goblin-like offsprings who transform this region into a place of shame and scorn. The micropolis turns into a massive work camp of the most horrible conditions under brutal taskmasters. The slaves are forbidden from complaining unless they want to lose their only way to survive. Oh, the benefits. Then there is a great emigration from the micropolises into these major financial hubs under the power of the Hypercordos. One family is fleeing the micropolis after the city is taken over by goblins, and all residents are summoned to give allegiance to the Hypercordo known as Pecunia. The emigrants turn into mere shells of themselves and mere robots of a foul machine. The Cecil Charism rises and announces that he will raise an army to fight in the battle against the Hypercordos through the ways of gentleness and paths of peace. He declares that his victory comes not from earthly armies nor paths of carnage. The Charism goes on to explain that he knows of those soldiers on Earth who love the micropolis and will bring them on the power of loyalty to their home and willingness to sacrifice glamour, power, wealth, and status. Then Daniel rises to announce his vision of a glorious day of victory, where a band of soldiers are cheered in victory over the Hypercordos as the flags of victory wave. The soldiers are hailed at the mighty hands of Brother Element, the Element's brother Volition, who led the effort to guide through the battle and restored the land to them. Then the soldiers tell this great story of the alarming war and pestilence at the hands of the offspring, and the arm of Brother Volition that had been one step ahead. At this declaration, the Jinns are called on the majesty of the dance to lead the micropolis from darkness to night to the glorious days of refreshment. Then the Jinns hail the dance in trust of glorious victory of the necropolis. The early summer. The summer after Milo finished his freshman year and before Amira was about to start high school had been quite eventful. In social studies, after taking the finals, the teacher put on the movie Sandlot. Some of the boys started getting bad ideas after Smalls pretended to drown so he could kiss Wendy. When it came to science class, the teacher gave the final on the last day of the last hour just to be a jerk, and bragged about how he made the last hours of school spending time doing work like the real world. As was common, many teachers did finals before the last day, as they wanted not to have to worry about teaching for another day. That first night, after school ended, the 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter episode was YMCA, where Grandpa Jim punches another member for talking about how Bridget, her granddaughter, is hot, right to his face. This man had not known that Jim was her grandfather. That first weekend, Ray was on the golf trip, and Milo, Margaret, Lydia, and Grandma Pearl went to lunch at Stacy's Retro Diner on Saturday. After lunch, they went to a garden center to pick up some flowers for the summer. That night, Margaret, Milo, and Lydia also decided to go to church in order to sleep in the next morning. On Sunday evening, Steve called Milo, inviting him to Elfando Amusement Park, located just past the Dayton area. No, not Dayton, but the Akron area. Milo was planning on going to Seawoodin with Lydia school picnic, but found Elfando to be a better offer. Mind you, Milo was still a little bummed out about the school picnics not occurring for him anymore. On that first Monday off, Milo went to Clubhouse with Lydia, Eustace, and Samantha. As it was, Milo would be gone for 2 days after this first day and could not start on any projects. That night, Doris and Merle called Milo a minimum of 5 times. They called for various things, like how much money to bring, what kind of lunch meat to buy for sandwiches, what kind of supplies to bring, and what time to be over at Merle's. After a few calls, and quite in a disorganized fashion, Margaret refers to Steve's family as a bit strange. That night, before going to bed, Milo was looking through that hymn website and found a song based on Isaiah 9, The People Who in Darkness Walk. Milo read over that passage in the Bible and had some flashbacks to being in that summer after 5th grade before starting 6th grade. On Tuesday morning, Milo was dropped off over at Merle's, and within a half hour, the Milo was on the road with Steve, Merle, and Doris. Now, after a 2-hour drive, they arrived in the neighborhood where Alexander Amusement Park was located. Frankly, the neighborhood was pretty ghetto. Merle got a chuckle calling this the ghetto amusement park before arriving. However, this amusement park proved to be a lot of fun. Elfonder was like a larger version of Seawooden. Milo felt like he had dreamed about this park not too long ago over Holy Week. Now Milo did have a dream about some old-timey park. Steve did not go on too many rides, and Milo ended up riding with Doris and Merle for the most part. On one occasion, there was a nasty downpour of rain, and the rides had to be shut down temporarily. After this downpour, the rides opened up, and Steve tried forcing Milo to go on the bumper cars for the 5th time. Milo told Steve that they should try out some new rides too. Steve said they would go on the bumper cars as many times as he said. So after this, Milo went on the rides with Doris and Merle. The first ride they had gone on for the rest of the day was the magic carpet. They also went on some roller coasters, what else? Like, haunted house, some indoor roller coaster, some spinny rides. One ride Merle thought was quite lame and called it a lousy quality piece of garbage. There was another ride that was identical to Seawooden's ride, like a Wipeout or something, but it was not quite as fast, which Merle also gave quite a humorous commentary on. On the way home, Doris told Milo all about how Steve had gotten fat after being on an ADD medicine. Luckily, Steve was fast asleep. Milo then told Doris all about the mysterious disappearance of Father Clausen, and how the choir director also seemed to just disappear at the same time. Then on Wednesday, Milo had another trip which she was looking forward to Cedar Point with the St. Timothy's Youth Group. This had been the first fun activity that Connie had planned. Milo had been looking forward to this trip since being reminded of Anahita and thinking about his previous trip before starting high school with Richard Esposito. With the new youth minister, the trip was scheduled quite earlier. Before Margaret dropped Milo off at the church that they were meeting at, let's see what else happened. Then, on the way up, Margaret asked Milo all about how his trip went. Margaret suggested that Milo get some sleep on the bus ride, as he had quite 2 early mornings and quite some very active days. Then Milo was dropped off at the church, and Milo spotted some people coming in, and noticed that it was Mr. Japan dropping Lucia off, who also went on this trip, as apparently she was part of the junior youth group, to which Milo never knew. On the bus when they all got in, Milo overheard Lucius talking about Disney coloring books. As it was, Milo did not think about who he would hang around with that day, as he forgot that he was not in Richard's planned group this year. On the way up, the movie Daredevil was shown. That day had been quite fun for Milo, as it was with Milo's arrival. He was a bit stumped about who he would hang around with. So Milo decided that he would bite the bullet and asked if he could hang around with some graduates who he sort of knew. Milo was in a group with some people he barely knew, but got to know during that day. One of the boys' fathers is good friends with Uncle Mike, and another's brother is good friends with Rob, older brother. No, his brother is friends with Rob. Another was a distant cousin, relationship-wise. In fact, that was that man who, Will, his son. On a couple occasions, such as waiting on roller coaster lines, Milo saw Lucia. On some other occasions, they went on a steel roller coaster and some, what are some other ones? They also went on, like, some water rides in the old country area, in that frontier area, and one of those, like, one of those roller coasters that, like, has their own power to throw you up in the air. Kind of like a corkscrew. Then, for lunch, they ate at a 50s diner-themed restaurant. When Milo got back, Ray picked him up from the church that Margaret originally dropped him off there. The next day, Milo was in a bit of a funk after being at amusement parks for 2 days, which had been quite enjoyable. Getting back was not so much fun, as he had some frustration with Lydia and Eustace. Milo had not been prepared for clay class, as he had been out of town for 2 days, which Lydia should have known. And Lydia told Milo that he should have had brought supplies to class, and that he knew about this class. Similar to it. Frankly, Milo did not appreciate being talked to that way, or Lydia acted like a teacher over some silly class. Eustace, on the other hand, was being a self-righteous snob, constantly making smart remarks, particularly at Milo when he was playing with Sylvester. On that day, when that Milo came back, He and Lydia had gone over to Aunt Jane's for the rest of the day after play camp. While playing one of Eustace's video games, Milo admitted he hated it. Eustace made this rude retort, telling him that if not to play it if he hated it so much, and then told him not to break the game. Oh, this made Milo quite pissed. Then one day afternoon later, Sylvester started playing with Milo's eyes. Milo did the same thing back to him in a playful fashion. Sylvester, being only 6, said that only he was allowed to do it. Eustace told Milo to stop picking on his brother, which Milo retorted that he was playing and Sylvester was doing it first. Eustace then tells Milo that two wrongs don't make a right. Milo was not one to take being lectured by so little brat, and was going to let Eustace have it big. A few days later, when they were playing with some water balloons, Eustace kept being bossy and telling them to be careful about where their water balloons go. So Milo let Eustace have it, and slammed the water balloon right at his back. And he started wailing, which put him in a foul mood the rest of the day. The next day, Eustace started saying things like that his mom was not too happy with Milo ballooning him. Frankly, Milo did not care, as he was getting sick of Eustace's bad and self-righteous attitude. The days in Londinium. For the kobolds, being back in Londinium, and by extension Headmortis, had been quite a strange experience. For the kobolds, they remembered how much they wanted to see Atlantica so long ago, and wondered if this trek was even worth it. To the Londinians, the kobolds seemed to be quite different than the kobolds they had known when they left for the term in Atlantica. Frankly, they seemed a bit shell-shocked. Vada told the stories of how the vendor woman did not take too well to Ulrich, Limad's departure, the Great Phoenix's visit, the task of attending to the possessed Atlanteans, and how they could be quite a nasty and fearful bunch. One Londinium told the kobolds now they understand what they went through, in reference to the shadow possession several years ago. After returning from Atlantica, the kobolds never bothered to walk through the mountains, as they had been fearful of coming into contact with the Atlanteans. The kobolds had feared that the vendor had already turned a large number of Atlanteans against them. Naturally, the kobolds had no interest in even finding out if this was true, or let alone ever returning to Atlantica. As it was, the kobolds got no further instructions and planned on sticking with Londinium in their headquarters. That year, the kobolds living in Pedmontis held a festival commemorating the appearance of the Great Phoenix, and by default, the visit of the unexpected guest. They had hoped that the Phoenix would return to them that year, but such a prospect was not realized. The Forester kobolds who traveled into Atlantica thought extensively about their meetings with the Great Phoenix one dark night, and how he brought tidings of restoration. Catherine and the evening. It seemed like this summer would not be going so well that year. Milo and Lydia were still spending a lot of time at Aunt Jane's, and Eustace was being just as priggish as ever. Sylvester had been in a foul mood, as he was on some unnecessary attention medicine. That year, the 4th of July was pretty simple. On Saturday, Jessie and Danielle held a family birthday party at Aunt Diane's to commemorate Ashlyn's first birthday. At this same time, Danielle was pregnant with her second-born, who would be staying a few months at Aunt Diane's. Well, Jessie was transferring somewhere else. For the 4th of July, the Rumcorns were in town, as they had to drop off Kyle, who would be moving into the Essex district. Kyle would be starting college at Susewego University in the fall. One Friday, the Bianca Tellos were invited to a family get-together at Elaine's house, as Uncle Al and Aunt Joan were in town for Ralph's son Jamie's wedding. As we remember, Ralph is one of Aunt Mary's sons. Both Aunt Mary and Uncle John were at the party, along with their kids, Grandma Pearl and Kyle. Milo had some flashbacks with the Williamsons, as he recently learned the song A Mighty Fortress, which he remembered had a flashback of being sung at Grandma Gladys's funeral. This had been the first time the Bianca Tellos had been at Elaine's since Grandma Gladys's funeral in the first place. Jason, Elaine's son, had been throwing the kids in the pool, which was the same pool Ben swam at several summers ago. Otherwise, Jennifer asked. Milo was telling Jennifer about this one time where, in class, a teacher brought in a little thing of chewing tobacco, and not a teacher, but some speaker, and the speaker asked Milo what he thinks it smells like. And Milo just said, my great-grandmother's old house, in reference to Grandma Gladys's place. That Saturday, Milo got invited over to Aunt Michelle's as his parents had to go to Jamie's wedding. That night, Milo, Aunt Michelle, and Gianni took a walk over to Grandma Dora's house, as Uncle Ottavio and Salvatore were painting her backyard porch. While getting ready to leave, Aunt Michelle started talking to her neighbor across the street. Milo first noticed the neighbor across the street named Catherine, but went by Katie. Milo had seen Katie before, but never noticed her until now. This girl is a talented musician on the fiddle, and also very pretty according to Milo. Milo had recognized the family from St. Timothy's, and Katie went to school with Minu. Her father, Nick, was also... what was her father's name? Nick was head of the church's folk band and lead guitar, singer and guitarist. The band also had a harmonica player, bassist, and the organist Jorge acting as the pianist. After Aunt Michelle's talk, she, Milo, and Gianni walked over to Grandma Dora's. When Uncle Ottavio and Salvatore were done working on the deck, the Fiorentinos, Grandma Dora, Aunt Michelle, Eustace, and Milo all were back to the house for dinner. For dessert, Uncle Ottavio served some spumoni ice cream. Later that night, Milo went back home to find that Uncle Al, Aunt Joan, and Grandma Pearl were visiting. Uncle Al got quite a kick out of Milo's plan on putting together a puzzle of a tiger mosaic made of smaller pictures of different felines. The next day, Milo and Ray went to the lake, as Lydia and Margaret went to a later noon mass. Lydia had a sleepover that ended at 11:30, even though mass started at 11. Ray considered just telling Lydia that they were gonna pick her up before 11 on the way to church, instead of making Margaret wait so long. They're not big on noon masses. Frankly, Milo did not really care to go to the noon mass, or the 11 o'clock mass anyways, as he was fearful of seeing the Jafaris in church. During that summer, Milo never walked in the Jafaris' neighborhood, as he had some unexplainable fear of the Jafaris. Possibly the big thing that bothered Milo was that Minu would be at the senior high school and really on a different page than him. Returned to the garden. After the feast of commemoration of the Phoenix, the kobolds decided to stay in the garden indefinitely. Frankly, the kobolds enjoyed the serenity of Pedmontis and had no interest in ever leaving. During their stay in Pedmontis, the kobolds enjoyed exploring the cliffs of Spartustica, walking through the woods, attending dinners and banquets, and traveling through their caves. and seeing Lake Tiberius. This nature scenery had been nice for the kobolds, who had been stuck in a rough part of a big city for almost a year. For the kobolds, the prospect of leaving Pedmontis was out of the question. During their stay in Pedmontis, the kobolds started making new friends with the residents, who had also been some of their distant relatives. Even the prospect of returning to Londinium had been less than ideal. For the time being, the kobolds rented a house in which they got a view of Atlantis, but did not typically like to look. During their stay, the kobolds learned much of the traditional music of the Pedmontis region. A new day. One Monday morning, Milo, Lydia, Eustace, and Samantha were supposed to have golf lessons, but got cancelled due to the rain. On the way home, Aunt Jane's car broke down, and they were temporarily stranded. Luckily, they got some help from some people Milo met just a couple days earlier. A few hours later, when Milo got home, he had gotten a call from Steve asking if he wanted to go to Seawoodin with him, Doris, and Merle the next day. Frankly, Milo was thrilled about this, as he could not stand being at Eustace's, and sick of having to walk on eggshells around Sylvester. That same afternoon, Milo found a now defunct website known as Hymprint.net, which comes from the GIA Music system. GIA Music is one of the major suppliers of Catholic hymnals and contemporary liturgical music in the United